Thank you so much for coming to my talk on to do MDR or not. That is the question. So according to Gartner, by 2025, 60% of organizations will be actively using some sort of threat disruption that is remote or containment capabilities delivered directly by, you guessed it, MDR providers. So that is up from 30% today. So the primary reason I wanted to do this presentation is because I'm seeing a huge influx of MDR services providers crowding this area with just some incredible capabilities, but also sometimes with just some sophisticated filler marketing. They can be really good at that. So I want to break down why we're seeing such a big boom in this area. And I want you to leave feeling confident about how to navigate this space. It can get very messy. There we go. All right. And before we dive in, I've got to do a quick disclaimer. So this presentation is a reflection of my own opinions. All case studies and data will be cited throughout the presentation as well as in the resource slide. All right. So what are we going to cover today? Obviously, before we can answer our titular question, we need to be able to understand what MDR is, how it came to be, and why it's such a prominent and growing part of security today, what the landscape looks like, and how it will continue to evolve and really blaze the path forward for how security operations centers, SOCs, should function. We're going to review some action items and takeaways so that you can take some with you so you know how to be able to proceed after the talk as far as best practices, possible tools, and how to move forward with evaluations. And also, we will have some time for questions, so please feel free to go ahead and queue them up in the chat here. Or if you're wanting to raise your hand, you should be able to go ahead and do that as well. I will try to catch them in the chat. I have them open here. So if it is relevant to what I'm covering, obviously I'll go ahead and bring it up here. So please ask all questions. I will give you some examples of some questions I've been asked in this space. So feel free to go ahead and fire them away. Okay, so who even am I? Why am I talking to you about MDR? So great to meet y'all. I'm Luz Angeles. I am a first-generation Mexican-American in cybersecurity based out of the beautiful tech hub of Austin, Texas. How did I get into cybersecurity? So I have always been a big defender and advocate, and big mama bear, if you will. So I started covering off all of IT. So client hardware, ITAM, licensing, Cisco, the works. It was astounding to me just how quickly insidious malicious actors continue to grow. I've seen not only my own clients and customers be affected by these threats, but also my friends and family. I mean, you think about the consequences of compromised credentials, like data breaches, which can quickly lead to terrible outcomes, even like identity theft and fraud on a personal level. I find the cybersecurity community to be incredible in their ability to be able to not only keep up with all of these malicious threats and actors, but continually innovate to make our world a safer place. Yes, they might be insidious and quickly evolving, but so are we. I've been in this space here for nearly a decade now, and I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. It's such a huge passion. Let's see, I am also passionate about promoting women and people of color into tech, obviously, especially if it's cybersecurity. I serve as co-chair of my company's ERG, WISH, Connecting and Celebrate the Diversity of Women in Tech. And I am also the treasurer of my local Austin WESIS affiliate, WESIS standing for Women in Cybersecurity. So in security, I started covering off really anything, whether it was email, endpoint identity, data. Honestly, it all intertwines at some point. And the goal here is to be able to ultimately address challenges and reduce risk. But really, I've shifted my focus to be a lot deeper within one specific area, which has been SecOps. I laugh because even though it's specific, it's still a lot. Now, I approach this from the perspective of the Security Operations Center, SOC. and whether we will go the route of building the SOC in-house through policies, processes, and workflows, or tools like automation, or more commonly through a managed service layer like MDR. I talk about MDR every single day. Not only is it a part of my actual role, but I'm also utterly fascinated by this area, why it exists, and how it continues to evolve and innovate. And by the way, please feel free to connect with me. I love seeing other women in cybersecurity do their thing, and I love to celebrate accomplishments. Join the space. It's always great to be able to go ahead and just see just so many incredible, fantastic women. It's inspiring. Okay. When I was putting this presentation together, I try to keep in mind some of the more common questions I typically get. I have this tool, is that MDR? If I have an MDR, do I need SIM? This company says they'll ingest all of my logs except cloud. Is that MDR? Do I really need MDR? Can't I just buy a SOAR tool or a next-gen SIM? How are MDRs different from MSSPs? Won't AI eliminate all of these as a service models at some point? These are all good questions. And in one aspect or another, I wanted to go ahead and ensure that I was addressing these questions. And what I quickly realized is that sometimes we're too eager to jump ahead. It is essential to ensure that we're understanding the origins of SOC, or of MDR, and that is SOC, the Security Operations Center. So that brings me to looking at MDR traditionally equaling SOC. I want to make it clear that is not always the case, but to be able to go ahead and ease us into the essentials of MDR, let's go ahead and look at it from that perspective. So simply put, MDR, Managed Detection and Response, is a managed service layer for a security operations center. And before I can properly explain more about MDR solutions exploding into the market, I firstly have to explain what SOCs are and why they are so important in our security functions. A little bit of SOC appreciation, if you will. So I'm going to recount some of the findings and works by Andy Greenberg, author of Sandworm. Phenomenal book, by the way. If you have any interest in SecOps or cyber war especially, you should absolutely check it out. Now, think of what happens when we don't have SOC teams. Everyone remembers NotPetya for a reason, and it was one of the first nation state attacks, and it was terrifying. Looking back at it, I mean, Maersk employees were utterly confused as they just saw rows and rows and rows of computer screens going black and then lighting back up again with a small ransomware message that was just so insidious and lingering. Imagine that immediate pit in your stomach. Hospital patients couldn't move forward with their surgeries because hospitals had been attacked with ransomware, so their systems were locked down. Normal citizens couldn't access cash from out of service ATMs because the POS systems and grocery stores were also down. They didn't know if they've had enough food to survive. These are all horrible results here. By the way, this will not be the only time I bring up NotPetya today. If you want to hear more, be sure to catch me later as well. All right, but now that we're kind of getting the picture here about the potential consequences and how dire they can be when we allow these attacks to be successful, that is. So let's move on to a case where SOC teams were actually successful and were able to actually be effective and intervene and do their thing. Now, most successful SOC case studies, you're not going to hear about them because if they've successfully done their job in quickly detecting the attack, maybe something suspicious was spotted on the network via your firewall or MDR tool and therefore your SIM, once it's confirmed as not being a false positive, you're able to act fast and quickly contain the attack by isolating the affected system, maybe cutting off network access, whatever you have to do to stop privilege elevation and lateral movement. And ideally, not having to go into remediation, but more so root cause analysis and maybe even digital forensics to understand the initial infiltration vector. And also to ensure no other systems are affected. Now, this case study I'm about to go into did have some initial consequences, but it could have been so much more worse if the team wasn't quick to mitigate and augment operations and begin reconnaissance. So let's go ahead and get into it. Have y'all heard of Olympic Destroyer? So this was a well-coordinated attack that was attempted on the 2018 Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Imagine this. It's opening ceremony, beautiful fireworks, you got somebody singing, you've spent years building out your IT infrastructure that could support crowds of more than 35,000 people. You've set up 10,000 PCs, 20,000 mobile devices, and over 6,000 routers and 300 data centers. It's a lot of work. This is the day to be able to go ahead and accomplish and celebrate all of that. But you're starting to hear murmurs and complaints of people not being able to connect to Wi-Fi, which you can brush off until you get a message saying something is shutting down every domain controller in the cell data centers. On your way out, because obviously you want to check on that, you realize people can't actually pull up their mobile tickets to get in. Plus, the RFID systems are down. Problems are compounding. Now, luckily, the Pyeongchang team did prepare for disaster scenarios and cyber attacks. The director of technology for the Pyeongchang Olympics organizing committee, Sung Jin-ung, was quick to begin doing what he could immediately. Stadium staffers started to distribute hotspots. Security was checking badges manually. They were doing what they could do to make sure operations were still able to go ahead and run through alternative means. Now, once he gets to the operations center, sometimes referred to as a war room, he confirms that the domain controllers are down, which means that not even his own team can access their systems. Now, luckily, they were able to figure out a temporary workaround so that the ceremony could at least close out. So they at least don't have to be worried about the night. Now, work begins to get these domain controllers up and running, but they quickly realize that anytime they're close to getting the devices re-imaged, the malicious actor would attack again. Ultimately, they realized that in order to stop the malicious actor, they would have to cut off their entire network from the internet, even though this was a drastic step, but it's what was needed to properly stop that malicious actor from repeatedly infiltrating their environment, disrupting their efforts to remediate. Luckily, the team had been working in tandem with OnLab, a security contractor, which worked really quickly to be able to go ahead and create a signature for them and finally purge out that malicious actor. They were able to identify the malicious file as winlogon.exe. It's always the common file names. They reset all the staffer passwords to ensure compromise could not be easily gained again. And within 12 hours, so yes, the entire night, they were able to restore backups, ensure networks were back up and running again. These folks ensured the Olympics were actually able to happen. You might have heard about the blip during the first day, but no news is good news. Now, the story of who did it is actually even more interesting. Such a good reverse engineering story and very messy due to attribution. So if that is something you're wanting to look at a little bit more, highly encourage you to check out Sandworm or even like the Wired article he did, or even the Darknet Diaries episode. Trust me on this one. So I like to tell this story because, yeah, a malicious worm got in, but we were able to see how an organized, prepared, experienced, and persistent team were able to endure and ensure that their systems didn't remain shut down. So what were the benefits and outcomes of having a SOC in place? Well, faster detection and finding IOCs and IOAs, indicators of compromise and indicators of attack, which therefore led to faster containment and remediation. The team was also able to evaluate the root cause analysis to ensure there were gaps and vulnerabilities were secured. So now they're lowering their overall risk for a cyber attack and potential breach. Now you might be asking, pues Luz, what's wrong with the SOC? They sound incredible, resourceful, and essential. Well, you're absolutely right. But as you might assume, the reason we have MDRs and why they're continuing to grow is because building, maintaining, optimizing your own SOC is challenging. A Devo Poneman report showed that 78% of cybersecurity professionals state that working in a SOC is, quote unquote, very painful due to the stress of excessive duties and inexperience dealing with them. I'm going to go ahead and break down some of the challenges. And while I do that, I was going to do a poll, but for the sake of time, maybe I'll just go ahead and ask here. What would you consider to be some of the top challenges? And if you don't have a SOC in your team, what do you think they might be? You can go ahead and just look at the ones on the screen and just see, like, what do you think that the top challenge might be there? So first and foremost, SOCs inherently require a team of people. Typically, we'll need at least a minimum of 6 people, 2 for monitoring, 1 for investigation, 1 architect or engineer, an administrator, and a SOC manager. You need some kind of a lead there. Now, all of these roles include different titles, such as like security operation officers, analysts, operations leads, and so on. The 2 for monitoring should not be slept on. You can't have one person stay up 24/7. The person that's getting the night shift, typically that is rotated, but it's never great to be in that situation. According to an ISC squared workforce study performed in 2022, there is a need for more than 3.4 million cybersecurity professionals, which is increasing. I think it's a 26% increase from her 2021 numbers. So as these threats continue to grow, more professionals are needed to be able to go ahead and fill in the space. So newsflash, if somehow you haven't heard of the cyber skills shortage yet, just know that it is very substantial. And again, as the complexity of threats grow, so will the need for more industry professionals to be influxed into our space. Now, the second challenge is seemingly as old as time itself. We have a difficult role communicating just how vital cybersecurity operations are to a company to be successful. And when that's understood and supported by leadership, it's fantastic. But when it's not, it can be painful. There's only so much we can do manually and with open source technology before scalable and more efficient security tools are required. Balancing alert overload is time consuming and exhausting. It's one of the reasons why sometimes we will let attacks come through because we just assume they're false positives. It is also one of the top reasons for turnover. Networks and environments are fickle things that need constant tuning and baselining. The barrage of alerts needs some sort of additional layer of verification to ensure there's no false positives, etc. Now, the typical goal in a SOC is to increase your ability to be able to detect threats faster and use those indicators of attack and compromise to remediate and contain threats quickly and effectively as well. So first off, you're always on alert with your head barely above the surface of the water. It's difficult to figure out how you can improve, but that is the goal despite the pressure. And again, just reiterating, the skills shortage is real, and I'll just lay off another fact. In a 2023 Fortinet report on the cybersecurity skills gap specifically, 68% of organizations indicate they face additional risk because of those shortages. So as you might imagine, there's not much time for training, and it's difficult to facilitate knowledge transfer when roles and responsibilities have pretty strict guidelines in escalating an alert, for instance. Once it's cleared as not being a false positive, having a high anxiety environment and atmosphere also doesn't help with this. All of these challenges compound on top of each other, meaning your ability to do any kind of proactive activity becomes difficult. It's already challenging to be effectively reactive and meeting your baseline target metrics and goals. Now, luckily, the importance of incident response planning is coming through as being a more crucial component to an overall cybersecurity strategy. For example, the recent SEC guidelines require that public companies disclose breaches within 4 days. So now we got to take some things really seriously. However, the ability to be able to proactively threat hunt by monitoring threat intelligence, dark web activity, fraud prevention, location or geo risk, account takeover protection, domain and brand abuse, amongst much others, is a lot more difficult to be able to prioritize, especially depending on your industry or vertical. The cherry on top is that a lot of these teams also have to do this remotely. Having gone through the pandemic, we all know that being able to effectively communicate and collaborate when we're completely remote comes with its own set of challenges. It makes the team less streamlined and mentorship opportunities not as natural. Like, you think it was difficult getting a leader mentor to kind of show you the ropes back when you were in office? Well, just wait till you're completely remote. Okay, let's see. So a lot of folks said tooling. Yeah, that is a big one. And then false positive reduction. I would certainly say you are both spot on. Those are some factors that do lead to a lot of the challenges we have here, like folks getting burnt out. Like, would you as an analyst stay at a company that's insisting that you either have to use open source tooling or a very poor tool set? It would be difficult to stick around knowing that you're not going to get support for better tools to be able to be more effective. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move on and finally get into what is MDR. All right, so now that we understand the fundamentals of SOC and why they're so important and all of the challenges that come with trying to build one in-house, I think it makes sense now on why we appreciate MDR. So according to Gartner, managed detection and response services provide customers with remotely delivered SOC functions. These functions allow organizations to rapidly detect, analyze, investigate, and actively respond through threat disruption and containment. They offer a turnkey experience using a predefined technology stack that commonly covers endpoint, network, logs, and clouds. Telemetry is analyzed within the provider's platform using a range of techniques, sometimes they're proprietary, and this process allows for investigation by experts skilled in respective areas like threat hunting and incident management, who deliver outcomes that businesses can act upon. Now, historically, this space began with just 24/7 monitoring. And I mean, listen, no one likes to wake up at 3 a.m. to deal with an alert that may be a false positive. Like, imagine if it's not. Like, I've had that nightmare. So naturally with monitoring, detection and alerting does become a facet. But sadly, the issue with alert overload did translate over to the managed space as well. Some providers even measured their efficacy by how many alerts they'd send you. Whoever thought of this alert overload DDoS style must have been a special kind of evil. Luckily, that is not the case anymore, so you don't have to worry. MDRs are an excellent space to learn the basics from a wide variety of different organizational setups, various tool sets. So you spread knowledge, you create natural or formal mentorship. They create incentives around certifications and being able to quickly and effectively remediate. Now, this will vary, but many MDRs today are leading by the front on what good SOC culture looks like. We'll touch on this a bit more once we get into the future of MDRs as well. One of the most prominent steps in the evolution of this managed space was introducing more SOC concepts, especially the notion behind remediation and containment, not just detection and investigation, and eventually helping improve a client's overall security posture. After all, SOCs are supposed to function as an extension of your security team and not just an alerting service. With that came the introduction of proactive threat hunting. So yeah, maybe they deploy honeypots, maybe they help with taking down fraudulent domains, they'll do a takedown, or introduce malware analysis capabilities. This is becoming an opportunity for MDR vendors to really show us what they're capable of. And I am getting impressed by it. Okay, so just wrapping up this section, we'll come back full circle here. So as you can see, there is a direct correlation to the challenges currently experienced today by SOCs and the benefits that MDRs are able to deliver. Honestly, like one for one. They are essentially solving for skill shortage, alert fatigue, and turn around by creating attractive SOC cultures. They are invested on keeping an eye on evolving and complex threats and how to tackle them. They might even have their own threat intelligence units. And yes, their success criteria of working with you will often involve reducing their MTD and MTTR, mean time to detect and mean time to respond or remediate. You do want to verify with them what their version means. And sometimes they will create exposure management, help you prioritize risk by mapping out your attack surface. Naturally, they will help with incident response planning. Some of them will, by minimum, establishing escalation paths and even helping with tabletop exercises and practice run-throughs amongst other services. And yes, of course, your cybersecurity insurance provider will be happy to see that you are investing in SOC capabilities. All right, so now that we know what function or what problem MDR is trying to solve for, you might be thinking, well, doesn't XDR, MDR, SOAR, etc. solve for the same thing? Well, that's a complicated question to answer. So let's dive into the messy landscape of MDR. And we're going to start at the bottom of a Las Vegas hotel and casino. So you walk in, and you start to walk away from the receptionist desk. You got your key, you're ready to explore, and you realize immediately there's about 6 different sets of elevators. And before you just automatically go to the closest one because you don't want to walk through the casino floor and I don't even know what that area looks like, let's slow it down. Let's start with the areas that MDR may overlap with and what it isn't. The combination of so many different aspects of security, creating a managed service layer, plus the growth of detection and response makes the navigation experience just a tad bit confusing. I chose these specific technologies because I can 100% guarantee you I have had many organizations ask me if their observability, SIM, SOAR, NDR, XDR tool can serve as an MDR. So here's the kicker. The answer absolutely varies depending on your specific use case, your requirements. What long-term goals are you trying to achieve? And also keep in mind that I have to change this Venn diagram almost on a weekly basis because of how these technologies are continuing to converge into one another and continually evolve. All right. So let's move away from this one. I am going to particularly touch on MDR, SIM, EDR, and MSSP. So we'll dig into those in a little bit. But we picked our elevator. Let's go ahead and go up. Okay. Whoa, this floor is wild. There's hotel rooms on this side, and there's maybe a conference going on because why there's so many people. But then there's also a ton of restaurants over there. And is that a Starbucks across from another Starbucks? No, it's a Pete's Cafe. So I'm showing you this landscape because even when we zoom in on the traditional MDRs, there's still a lot of complexity that we need to traverse. So to do that, let's remove the MDR vendors and solutions providers, and let's go up to the secluded pools and hot tubs to just center ourselves, get some time to breathe and actually think. So stripping it out here. What makes all of these different? So because we all have so many different challenges and will vary in our range of needed support and augmentation of specific services, that will also reflect in the range of service delivery models that you'll see in the MDR landscape, hence these little bubbles here. Now, keep in mind that the reason I chose this format is because one delivery model isn't inherently better than the other. It all really depends on what you specifically need out of that services provider. So MSSPs, let's start with the big elephant in the back. The original iteration of the managed security service layers was this. Traditionally, MSSPs would help onboard, continually tune, configure, and essentially help co-manage a huge extent of your security tools. And they still do that today. However, one of the primary reasons MDR exploded into the market is because MSSPs lacked the optimized alerting, and the ability to be able to do full remediation. Like they were those alert factors I mentioned a little bit earlier. In fact, it is hard to ignore that some MSSPs have been the cause of breaches just due to being negligent of secure practices. On a Darknet Diaries episode with Nicole Beckwith, Nicole recounts how she went to help out a police station after they got hit by ransomware. And she discovered that anyone could RDP without a VPN, into the police station's domain controller, which, as we were recounting Pyeongchang, that basically allows them access to everything. Now, when Nicole asked their services provider to shut down the external access, they initially refused. Now, eventually they did get everything resolved, but the fact that she had to ask more than once was disturbing. Now, luckily, to ensure they are meeting customer demands, a lot of MSSPs have caught up with the times here. They've shifted their focus from not just co-management, but to also focusing on better detection and remediation capabilities as well. Something to keep in mind for some MSSPs is that their actual response and remediation capabilities may actually be outsourced, meaning they don't have that expertise already in-house. Might matter, might not matter. Now, the next iteration we saw, kind of moving over here to the left now, was the managed SIEM and managed EDR solutions, which typically warrants an organization having to use their specific solution stack, which it can kind of bleed over to the SME, subject matter expert, managed service layer, which could be the vendor, or it could be a separate entity that's dedicated to mastering that specific solution stack, like a Microsoft or a Cisco Splunk. EDR, and even more so XDR, alongside with SIEM, were scraping for a managed service layer. Very powerful tools, but also very complex. That managed service layer can ensure you're utilizing the full ROI on your tool so that you're maximizing your investment and that you're not just letting the tool sit there because you don't know how it works. Do you really want to take 20 plus more hours of that training course? Yeah, and plus you might just not have time. So let's talk about managed SIEM for a second. Some MDR vendors deliver their own hosted SIEM as a service, and there are pros and cons to owning your own SIEM. SIEMs require expertise. They are seemingly increasingly expensive as you feed it more data, and that can lead to just being strapped with resource-intensive issues. That's why technologies like data lakes and data management and optimization tools have become so popular. But despite how the ingest and optimization may evolve, a managed service layer can help ensure you are getting the most value that you can. Now, the ways that they do this can be by simply just being able to manage it. Like that's a good goal within itself. But also being able to go ahead and provide customized playbooks, leverage their own proprietary technology, are huge items to be able to go ahead and further consider. Now, the larger and more increasing evolutionary layer that we're seeing lately is that BYO tool, bring your own tools model. So that going back to the Las Vegas hotel here, if you will, like this is the buffet. It's fully Las Vegas style. You got a lot of options and it's good quality. This is where the solution stack may be highly curated. They could choose to prioritize the most effective security technologies out there. Maybe those technologies are high scores on the MITRE ATT&CK alignment, or they could just go the route of continually bringing in more solutions as the customer demand grows. So if somebody is screaming at them, like, we need more Microsoft, you need more Microsoft, maybe eventually they'll bring in Microsoft. So they can accommodate a large variety of customers. The increasing capabilities around APIs like bilateral integrations and the ability to automate workflows is making this a more seamless option. Now, all these little bubbles here, you can consider them to be niche, as there are new technologies and service delivery models constantly being created. Now, on top of all of this, there's also different response models. You can choose your MDR to also be your IR incident response provider in triaging alerts and doing the full remediation. You can opt to co-manage, so you're working in tandem with each other on remediating and solving for root cause analysis as well. Or you can opt to do an earlier version of what some MDRs do, where only guidance about how to remediate is offered. You might be in a case where you just need the tier 1, tier 2 support, right? You got a tier 3, tier 4 team, or maybe just budget limitation, and that might be a huge factor there, unfortunately. There is a lot to keep in mind here, but this should help you get started in some ways to be able to go ahead and address your own internal risk. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to dive into the future of MDR. So going back to my initial statement of MDR's continued expected growth, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. As long as we have a gap or challenge that needs to be addressed specifically by humans, there will be a managed service layer that is there to help. All of the as a service models, they're going to be around for a while. And the thing about MDR providers is that they are leading the way on what state-of-the-art SOCs should look like, from the culture to creating effective virtual war rooms, good collaboration practices, to how playbooks are created and utilized, to how they're integrating AI to their advantage. So let's go ahead and dig a little bit more into what we're going to expect to see from the MDRs. So where SOCs were once fully reactive, we are seeing more and more sophistication be put into automation technologies like SOAR, security orchestration, automation response. All of this is done with careful consideration to ensure that these workflows will be effective. As I mentioned earlier, we are continuing to see the convergence of security technologies being able to just kind of go into one another here, like being able to map vulnerabilities to alerting, but also that of what network observability has to offer alongside with cloud. It's vital that our SOC offers the ability to be able to view all of these areas seamlessly. So when it comes to the old motto of single pane of glass, MDRs are truly trying to figure out what can we do from this detection and response and vulnerability threat space to be able to go ahead and bring this all together, make that SOC unit more and more effective. We're also going to continue to see innovative approaches to data ingestion and management. Traditional ingestion, as it stands now, can be cumbersome, unpredictable, costly, cause large performance drains, and still not give you the answers you need sometimes. So data tools like ETLs, extract, transform, and load, or parser modifiers and data lake methodologies are showcasing a new way to be able to go ahead and tackle this problem. And thanks to John Doerr, objective-based metrics and SLAs like MTTR and MTTC will continue to be measurements for continual approval. And you know what? To John's credit, he's not wrong. We do, in fact, need to measure what matters. And if you're not getting that, so John Doerr wrote a book, Measure What Matters. It's an industry gold standard for a lot of leadership folks out there. Now, with the convergence of DevSecOps, we'll also see the adoption of agile workflows rather than time-consuming waterfall methodologies. So really, we're just bringing in those methodologies so that we can be a lot more agile, work in tandem, and be quick and effective, and implement our lessons learned more effectively and quickly and timely. Of course, we're going to see the increasing application of AI to supplement tier 1 objectives, enrich contextual data, optimize playbooks, of course, and create alternative query methods through generative AI prompts. We're actually seeing that last point quite frequently now, and it's helpful. We got to be able to start from somewhere, and I'm excited to see the evolution there. But that we have to take care to be able to go ahead and be patient with letting these models grow, and be conscious of how, again, we can utilize those tools to our advantage and not be replaced by them. There's certainly much more to come, like establishing best practices, like I mentioned, for virtual war rooms, etc. MDRs are not just putting bodies in seats, but they're investing a lot of money, time, resources into continually building more effective, faster, seamless ways to be able to go ahead and detect and respond. And that is their expected business outcome. And that's a good place to be. Literally being able to prioritize detection and response in your SOC operations. No wonder they're kind of leading the industry here. Okay, so let's go back to our titular question. Do I invest in MDR? To MDR or not? All right, so now that we are basically MDR experts, let's answer this question. So at this point, you should have a good idea of how MDRs work. But let's break it down into some common use cases that we see. And again, I'm not going to do the poll. So what I'm going to ask y'all instead is, looking at the screen, I am going to go ahead and explain what all of these use cases are. But what do y'all think your use case is? Is it no SOC? Is it SOC on the roadmap? Do y'all think you have a partial SOC, or are you lucky enough to be in a full SOC? I'd love to be able to go ahead and see what y'all have to say about that. So let's go ahead and start with no SOC. Everything's on fire. And you're going to tell yourself this is okay. So this may mean requiring support in the initial setup and onboarding, long-term maintenance and oversight. Considering MSSPs for high-level broad support may make sense here. If you're just really strapped, you might not have anybody that is security specific. You might just really need that big helping hand, and you might have to prioritize some things over others until you are able to go ahead and build out a more efficient SOC team. SOC on the roadmap. So at least you've gotten approval, you have the long-term vision, you know eventually you're going to build out that SOC. And maybe right now you're already getting approval for some good tooling, for some processes, but you still need to mature and develop requirements. Like, so for example, Mulan has a ton of potential and she is putting in the work to be formidable. And hey, by the end, her team is able to social engineer their way into the palace. So you got to give them props for that. But because of that, you have a really good vision of what you need. Therefore, you can evaluate MDR vendors on a much more substantial level than if you didn't have any security folks at all. Partial SOC. So this is the one where, honestly, it's the most common, where we see a dedicated SecOps security operations team, but they're unable to meet their metrics. A lot of their time may be spent on alert overload, meaning they could benefit from tier 1 and tier 2 support, and even remediation. The cadets from Attack on Titan, hopefully we have some anime fans here, they are doing their best to protect the literal perimeter walls in their case, despite the high casualties. But every time they want to be proactive and conduct missions, the likelihood of getting eaten by a Titan is just way too high. So last but not least, full SOC. A fully capable SOC, you might think they certainly don't need MDR. They should be good, right? But a full SOC might want to be able to go ahead and use a managed services to create efficiency by expanding the availability of the existing team to carry out more business-focused threat defense. The MDR may focus on optimizing a specific tool set, like maybe just Splunk in particular. They can specialize in comprehensive threat intelligence, so maybe they're not doing much management, but more so being that reliable source to be able to tell you, like, hey, we saw domain fraud, you want to prove this takedown, etc. They might also be specialized in attack surface, exposure management, amongst many others. I mean, it's the BTS army. They're unstoppable, relentless, and omnipresent. Need I say more? And let's see what y'all had to say here. Okay, due to cost factor, what size companies, enterprises use these? Fantastic question. I would say all of them. So if you are looking at a no SOC, you might be looking at an SMB or medium-sized business, even some large businesses. I've seen this. So think anywhere from 300 to 2,000 seats, 5,000 if you're going a little bit more into the medium and large. It will vary on whether or not they actually got approval to be able to go ahead and actually move forward with a SecOps team. Let me just make sure y'all can hear me. Uh-oh, I think I might have been kicked out. But let me just go ahead and move forward just in case I'm still up. SOC on the roadmap, that one obviously has approval. That can also probably be large businesses. Partial SOC, typically we'll see a lot of the Fortune 500, a lot of startups, a lot of private sector businesses be in this specific area. No, full SOC, think of the Fortune 50. Like these are folks with, 20 people SOC teams. Like it's very comprehensive. They might just add in a managed service layer for a very specific reason. Okay, thank you, Jake. I just wanted to go ahead and make sure because I am getting a pop-up that I need to wrap up here soon. So thank you for confirming. Yep, lack of budget for tooling and headcount makes it a challenge to create a full SOC. You're absolutely right, Geneva. And that leads me to honestly the last point that I have here, which is additional considerations. The last thing I'll leave you with as a little bit of a takeaway, if you will, is to consider some of the other requirements here. Yes, budget. It's like the big elephant in the room, right? We can't be looking at a Ferrari thinking it's going to be the same cost of a Kia. Unfortunately, that's something that you really have to factor in. For instance, I actually just spoke to a customer earlier where they got a really good deal on Splunk, but they have no idea how to be able to go ahead and manage it. They bought it because obviously like it's one of the best SIMs out there. They wanted to go ahead and take advantage of the good offer that they got. But their poor Splunk admin is way in over his head, which is one person for a team of over 1,000 people. I definitely feel him. So for his case in particular, I don't know if they'll get approval for something like a deep watch, for instance. They might have to consider other routes, but that's just an example there. Dashboards. Do you align to specific compliances where you would need a PCI HIPAA dashboard or maybe even a MITRE ATT&CK benchmark? Something else here is to consider the extent of the remediation guidance. So if you're only looking for tier 1 and tier 2 support, then you're kind of wasting your time looking at services providers that distinguish themselves by having some of the best IR. Like why would you look at maybe a Mandiant's a little bit weird right now because of the whole Google thing, but they are best in class for IR. If you more so need help with co-management, I'm not too sure if it makes the best sense. But you could also have the inverse scenario, which brings me to the next point. Ability to be able to do incident response and digital forensics and incident response. If you don't have these capabilities in-house, it may be something you could get from the MDR. SIM for technology access. If you know that you're logging into that MDR console at least once a week, but that's it, this might not be a big deal. But if you're counting on that MDR to give you full visibility into your entire environment, being able to see queries, effectively pull up the logs you need, see an analyst workflow, then having that visibility might be important to you. And yes, some of them do limit that visibility because they have proprietary backends of SIMs they've built out themselves. The extent of the co-management. So some MDRs can really hold your hand on getting you onboarded, continually tuned, while others are going to assume you might just need an integration to ensure a remediation playbook is built out. Security health checks. So some MDRs are more proactive than others when it comes to ensuring you're improving your overall security posture and providing guidance on that. What does the SOC team look like? At minimum, you should have a customer success team, but maybe it's also important to you that you have at least 2 analysts and maybe even someone focused on threat hunting. Duration and approach to onboarding and baselining. This can vary depending on the security components you're looking for in an MDR to help you with. So some MDRs might aim to give you configuration guidance, while others will aim to create those customized playbooks. You might also have specific capabilities that you expect an MDR to have, like threat intelligence, vulnerability scanning, SOAR. So hopefully all of this is a good starting point to be able to go ahead and help you build out further requirements that are actually tailored to your specific company as well. This is just a starting list of the most common ones that we see. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because I am close on time here. So let's go ahead and recap here. For some action items, recap what your specific use case is. Do you have potential requirements? If not, start making that list. Like, you want to make sure it's thorough. You want to make sure that this MDR service is going to be a match. Keep in mind which MDR service delivery model would make the most sense. The last point might seem obvious, but you would be amazed at the number of folks who forget to keep their objective criteria and requirements top of mind when evaluating options. People have some really slick ways that they're able to go ahead and market, and they are effective sometimes, but always keep in mind those requirements. So I want to be able to go ahead and leave you with this. You might feel very overwhelmed right now. Yes, threats will continue to increase and evolve, but we have a plethora of resources, such as our communities, frameworks, and solution providers that can help ensure we're defending our organizations to the best of our abilities. Keep in mind that MDR is aiming to address some of the most threatening challenges, and that should bode as a huge release to you to know that there are many options that could offer solutions. So evaluate if it makes sense to address some of it by specific risk or by leveraging the benefits that they're able to offer here. Okay. Huge point of appreciation goes to the incredible folks who are doing the work to collect the data and the solution providers in this space who are leading the way and showing us how to evolve our practices and processes and use technology to our advantage to continually optimize. And I'd like to give an immense thank you to my mentors and the thought leaders in the space who lent their time in the space, who lent their time in the space, obviously, but also their time and expertise and stayed patient with me through rough versions of this presentation. So Samara Moore, Ben Boyd, Adam Haley, Ryan Benson, thank you so much for your insight and guidance. And with that, I'm going to see if we have time for any more questions, but we are up on time, so we might have to end it here. But thank you so much for listening. All right, folks, I don't see much questions, so I'm going to stop sharing here. All right, thank you so much.